The smell of gardenias was going to make me sick. It was too sweet, too heavy, cloying in the still, warm air of the marquee. I stood in the center of the empty dance floor, the parquet wood glossy under the string lights that twinkled uselessly in the mid-morning sun. All around me, 120 chairs, dressed in ivory chiffon and tied with silver bows, faced a blossom-strewn arch where my only child was supposed to have become a wife in exactly 2 hours. The wedding planner, a young woman named Sophia with a headset and a clipboard that seemed an extension of her arm, touched my elbow gently. "Mrs. Everly? The violinist is here. He's asking about the prelude music selection. Should he stick with the Vivaldi or switch to the Bach if we're delaying?" Her voice dropped on the last word, a careful professional euphemism for the disaster unfolding. A delay. That's what we were telling the vendors, the guests who'd started to call. A minor delay. The bride is a little behind schedule. Everything is fine. Everything was not fine. My daughter Chloe was upstairs in the bridal suite of this country club, her hair and makeup perfectly done, a vision in raw silk and Venetian lace, staring at a phone that had been silent for 19 hours. Her fiancé Leo was not in the groom's suite. He was not answering his phone. He was gone. And I knew why. "The Vivaldi is fine," I heard myself say, my voice strangely calm, a flat lake over a drowning depth. "Play the Vivaldi." Sophia nodded, murmuring into her headset as she walked away, her heels clicking a sharp, anxious rhythm on the floor. I turned slowly, taking in the obscene perfection of it all. The crystal glasses catching the light, the place cards in my own cursive handwriting, the towering cake with its delicate sugar flowers that had taken months to design. I had planned every detail. I had poured myself into this day, into this celebration, into this lie. Because that's what it was. A beautiful, elaborate, gardenia-scented lie. I had planned my daughter's dream wedding to the man I paid to leave her. The thought didn't come as a shock. It had been living inside me for months, a cold, hard stone in my gut. But here, in the tangible reality of the empty chairs, it took on a new weight. It crushed the air from my lungs. I had wanted to protect her. That's what I had told myself late at night, staring at the ceiling, justifying the unforgivable. I am her mother. It is my job to protect her. But as I looked at the empty arch, a question whispered through me, one that would haunt me for years. Had I protected her from a predator, or had I simply become a more efficient predator myself? Had I stolen from my daughter not just a wedding day, but her trust, her joy, her belief in love, and ultimately her belief in me? I walked to the sweetheart table, running a finger over the embossed script on the place card that read Leo. The card was cool and smooth. I picked it up, and with a calm that felt psychotic, I slipped it into the pocket of my mother-of-the-bride dress, a pale blue sheath I'd chosen because Chloe said it brought out the gray in my eyes. I wanted to remember this. The precise texture of my hypocrisy. A sound broke the silent hum of the refrigerated flower truck outside. A muffled, choked sob from the direction of the main clubhouse. It was a sound of pure, unraveling heartbreak. It was Chloe. My body moved before my mind could command it, the maternal instinct a relentless puppeteer. I was halfway across the lawn, the dewy grass soaking the hem of my expensive shoes, when I stopped. What was I running to do? To comfort her? To hold her while she cried over the man I had bribed to break her heart? To whisper, "It's all right, baby." When I was the architect of this pain, I was the villain in her story, and she didn't even know it. The guilt was a taste then, metallic and sour like a penny on the tongue. It was the taste of my secret. It would become my constant companion, my prison, my punishment. This is where the story truly begins. Not with a happy engagement, but here in the ruins of a wedding I built with my own hands and money. This is my confession. Not just of what I did, but of why. Of the fear that felt like love, of the manipulation I mistook for wisdom, and of the long cold winter that fell between my daughter and me, a winter I caused. This is the story of how I broke my daughter's heart to save her, and in doing so, almost lost her forever. To understand the poison, you have to first remember the garden. Our life before Leo was not extravagant, but it was deeply, quietly rich. It was the two of us in the old craftsman house on Willow Lane, a house filled with the ghost of my husband, James, and the living, breathing light of our daughter. James had been gone for 8 years when Leo appeared. A sudden massive heart attack at 52 that left a silence so profound I thought it would swallow Chloe and me whole. He was a quiet man, an architect who spoke more with his pencils and his kindness than with grand speeches. He built our home, not just the structure but its soul. The window seat in the breakfast nook where he'd read the paper. The sturdy oak table he'd sanded and finished himself. Its surface now a map of our lives. Coffee cup rings, homework scratches, the faint watermark from the time Chloe tried to make a volcano for the science fair. After he died, the house felt like a museum for a life that was over. But Chloe, she was only 16. She needed the house to be a home again. So we learned. We learned how to unclog the sink and reset the circuit breaker. We planted a vegetable garden in James's old plot, and when the tomatoes grew in twisted, glorious abundance, we ate them with tears and laughter, our faces stained with summer. We became a unit, a pair. Mother and daughter, yes, but also something like survivors in the same lifeboat, rowing in steady, silent sink. Chloe was my quiet storm. She had James's thoughtful eyes and my stubborn chin. She was brilliant, a master's in clinical psychology, but her intelligence was a soft, empathetic light, not a harsh beam. She worked at a community mental health center, often coming home emotionally drained but fiercely fulfilled. She felt things deeply, which was her greatest strength and, I would later fear, her most terrible vulnerability. And me? I was Evelyn. I had been a partner to James, and now I was the keeper of the flame, the steward of what he'd left us. I ran a small, successful interior design studio from the sunroom. It gave me flexibility, a creative outlet, and, importantly, financial stability. James's life insurance and prudent investments meant we were comfortable. Not private jet comfortable, but never worry about the mortgage or college tuition comfortable. It was a safety net I was profoundly aware of, a nest egg I guarded like a dragon. It was for Chloe's future. It was all for Chloe's future. Our rhythm was simple. Weekday evenings were for shared meals at that oak table, Chloe debriefing her day, protecting client confidentiality of course, me talking about fabric swatches and difficult clients. Weekends were for farmers markets, long walks, and sometimes, just reading in companionable silence in the living room. We were content. We were healing. Then she brought Leo home for Sunday dinner. I remember the smell that night was pot roast, James's favorite. A comfort meal. Chloe was buzzing. A nervous energy I hadn't seen since her first piano recital. "Just be yourself, Mom," she'd said, squeezing my hand. "He's amazing." From the moment he stepped into the foyer, Leo was dazzling. That's the only word. He wasn't just handsome. He was constructed. Dark hair with just the right amount of casual disarray. A smile that seemed to engage his whole face, reaching his warm hazel eyes. He wore a simple cashmere sweater and carried a bottle of wine that was just the right side of impressive without being pretentious. "Mrs. Everly," he said, taking my hand in both of his. His grip was firm, warm. "Chloe talks about you with so much love. This house, it has a beautiful energy. You can feel the history." His gaze swept the living room, lingering on James's bookshelf. "A reader." "My husband was," I said. "A man of taste," Leo nodded, as if he'd known him. He presented the wine. "A Pinot Noir from a small vineyard in Oregon. I heard you appreciate thoughtful craftsmanship." The evening was a masterclass in charm. He helped me in the kitchen without being asked. He listened to Chloe with rapt attention, his eyes never leaving her face. He asked me thoughtful questions about design, citing an architect or a movement at just the right moment to show genuine but not showy knowledge. He was perfect. And that was the first seed of doubt. It was so small a pinprick. Because nobody is that perfect. James wasn't perfect. He'd forget anniversaries, leave his socks on the floor, get absorbed in a drafting problem and burn the toast. Perfection is a performance. But Chloe's face, it was radiant. She watched him like she'd been wandering in a desert, and he was a mirage that turned out to be real water. She was in love. Deeply, completely. And after years of watching her carry a quiet grief, to see her so alive, so hopeful, I smothered the pinprick of doubt. I told myself I was being a cynical, overprotective widow. My daughter had found a good man. A charming, attentive, successful man. He was a financial consultant, he told us. Worked with high-net-worth individuals to optimize their legacy planning. It sounded impressive. Stable. As they left that night, Chloe hugged me extra tight. "Well," she whispered, her voice thick with hope. "He's wonderful, sweetheart." I whispered back, and I meant it. I wanted to mean it. I cleared the table. The ghost of James so palpable at that moment it was like a breath on my neck. I could almost hear his quiet, measured voice. "Just keep your eyes open, Ev. For her." "I am," I said aloud to the empty kitchen. "I will." But what were my eyes open to? To potential happiness or to potential threat? The line, I would learn, is terrifyingly thin, and it is drawn not in the sand, but across the heart of a mother. The suspicion didn't arrive as a thunderclap. It seeped in like a slow, cold draft under a door you thought was sealed. For the first few months, everything was a whirlwind of happiness. Chloe bloomed. She laughed more, a full, unguarded sound I hadn't heard since before James died. Leo was attentive, sending her flowers at work for no reason, planning surprise weekend trips. He integrated himself into our rhythms with an ease that was both comforting and increasingly unsettling. He'd join us for Sunday dinners, always with the perfect host gift, a rare cheese, a boutique olive oil. He'd ask about my business, offering unsolicited but clever marketing advice. He'd talk about the future with a confident, sweeping clarity that Chloe found reassuring. A house in the hills. Travel. A family. It was during one of these future planning conversations about 5 months in that I felt the first real chill. We were at my table, finishing a lemon tart. Leo was refilling our glasses with dessert wine. "The market is shifting, Evelyn," he said, leaning back. "A lot of my clients are moving assets into more tangible stores of value. Property, art, rare commodities. That nest egg you've so wisely built. It's impressive, but in the current climate, it could be working harder for you." He smiled, warm, inclusive. "For both of you. I'd be happy to look at your portfolio, no obligation. Consider it family service." The words were smooth, logical. A generous offer. But my skin prickled. It was the first time he directly referenced my finances. Our finances. The nest egg. I saw Chloe beam at him, so proud of her savvy, protective man. "That's so sweet of you, Leo," I said, my smile feeling brittle. "But James's financial advisor has been with us for 20 years. I'm a creature of habit, I'm afraid." A flicker so fast I almost missed it passed behind his eyes. Not anger. Annoyance. Like a chess player whose opponent made an unexpectedly stubborn move. It was gone in a nanosecond, replaced by understanding warmth. "Of course," he said, raising his glass. "Loyalty is the most important commodity of all. To family." The toast should have felt nice. It felt like a marker had been laid down. After that, I started to notice patterns. The way he always steered conversations toward money, however subtly. Asking about the value of the house, given the rising market in our neighborhood. Mentioning a client who'd been taken to the cleaners by an elderly parent's poor financial planning. It was always framed as concern, as expertise, as wanting the best for his girls. My unease grew roots when I met his friends. Chloe was thrilled. Leo was taking her to a dinner party with his inner circle. She wanted me to help her pick a dress. They all sound so successful, Mom. Lawyers, entrepreneurs. I just want to fit in. She looked beautiful when he picked her up. A week later, she mentioned they'd had a wonderful time. But something in her tone was flat. What were they like? I asked as we folded laundry. She paused, holding one of Leo's crisp monogram dress shirts. They were intense. Very focused on deals, on net worth. A lot of talking at each other. One of them, Marcus, kept asking me what my parents did, where I went to school. She shook her head, trying to dismiss it. It was just a different vibe. Leo was the sweetest one there. A different vibe. His world was one of transactions. And my daughter, with her psychology degree and her heart full of empathy, was a non-liquid asset in that world. What was her value? The definitive clue came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, sourcing fabric samples online when the doorbell rang. It was a delivery man with a large, flat package for Leo. He'd been leaving more and more things at our house. I can sign for it, I said. The package was from a high-end custom tailor. As I carried it to the guest room closet where Leo now kept a few things, the tape on one end came loose. I didn't mean to look. But the slick, embossed invoice was sitting right there, partially slid out of its tissue paper wrapping. It was for 2 suits. The total was staggering. More than I charged some clients for a full room design. But it wasn't the amount that stopped my breath. It was the handwritten note at the bottom, in elegant script, to be billed to the account of L. M. Everly per prior arrangement. Congratulations again on the engagement. L. M. Everly. My blood ran cold. They weren't married. The house was in my name. Chloe had no significant assets of her own. There was no L. M. Everly account. Not unless. I carefully resealed the package, my hands trembling. I placed it in the closet and shut the door. I walked back to the sunroom, sat at my desk, and stared out at the garden James had built. He was already spending money in her name. He was embedding himself not just into our lives but into our financial identity. The charming future talk, the elitist friends, the constant gentle probing about assets. It wasn't concern. It was reconnaissance. That night I did something I hadn't done in years. I went into the basement, to the old fireproof box where I kept our important documents. I pulled out the file labeled Wills/Trusts. James's last will. My own. The trust he'd set up for Chloe, accessible to her at 30 or upon marriage. Upon marriage. The words seemed to pulse on the page. In 6 months, if she married him, he wouldn't just have access to her heart. He'd have a pathway to everything James had worked for, everything I'd guarded. He could bleed that trust dry with investments, with business opportunities, with custom suits. I saw it then with a terrifying clarity. Leo wasn't just a gold digger. He was a strategist. He was playing a long, patient game. And my sweet, trusting Chloe, who saw the good in everyone, was the perfect mark. I closed the box. The cold draft was now a howling wind in my soul. I had to do something. But how do you tell the sun that the light it feels is a trap? How do you make someone see a snake when they are convinced it's a ribbon? Confronting Chloe directly would make me the villain in her eyes, the jealous, controlling mother who couldn't let her be happy. She would choose him. I knew it in my bones. I would lose her. So I made a choice. A terrible, irreversible choice. I decided to cut the snake's head off myself in the shadows, and let Chloe believe it had simply slithered away. I would become the villain she never knew she had, to save her from the one she loved. The plan formed not in a flash of inspiration, but in the slow, dread-filled hours of a sleepless night. It was crude. It was transactional. It mirrored the very world I feared Leo inhabited, and that was perversely what gave me the confidence it might work. He understood currency. I needed to meet him alone, somewhere with no witnesses, no digital footprint, no cozy coffee shops. I waited for a day. Chloe had a weekend counseling retreat, a mandatory professional development event she couldn't miss. I told her I was driving to a design conference in a neighboring city. Instead, I booked a private meeting room at a generic upscale business hotel near the airport, the kind of place where anonymity is part of the decor. I paid cash for the room for 3 hours. The morning of the meeting, I dressed not as Evelyn the mother, or Evelyn the designer, but as a version of myself I didn't recognize. A severe black pantsuit, my hair pulled back tightly, minimal jewelry except for my wedding band. I needed to look like what I was about to become, a negotiator. I arrived early. The room was soulless. Beige walls, a polished mahogany table, a carafe of water sweating in the sterile air conditioning. I placed a simple manila envelope in the center of the table. My heart was a frantic bird against my ribs. At precisely 10 a.m. he knocked. I called, "Come in." Leo entered, his expression one of polite, slightly amused confusion. "Evelyn? Chloe said you were out of town. Is everything all right? You had me worried." The concern in his voice was perfectly pitched. The performance was already beginning. "Everything's fine. Please sit." My voice was steady, a miracle. He sat across from me, his eyes flicking to the envelope, then back to my face. The charming smile was still there, but it was cooling, assessing. The businessman was coming to the surface. "What's this about?" I didn't waste time. "I know what you're doing, Leo." He blinked, the picture of innocent bewilderment. "I'm afraid I don't." The tailor's invoice. L.M. Everly. The constant questions about our assets, the trust, the property value. The way you've isolated Chloe from her old friends by filling her time with your circle. I kept my hands folded on the table, my knuckles white. "You're not marrying her for love. You're marrying her for access." His face underwent a subtle transformation. The warmth drained away, not into anger, but into a cold, analytical calm. The mask slipped and what was beneath was not a monster, but something worse. A rational, unemotional operator. He didn't deny it. He leaned back in his chair and regarded me with a new, unsettling respect. "You're more observant than I gave you credit for, Evelyn." The admission was like a punch to the throat. Hearing it aloud, the confirmation of my worst fear, made the room tilt. "So it's true." He shrugged, a small, elegant gesture. "Love is a complicated thing. I care for Chloe. Deeply. She's a wonderful girl. But a man has to be practical. We would have had a good life. I would have taken excellent care of her. With her money. With our money," he corrected gently. "Marriage is a partnership." The audacity, the calm entitlement stole my breath. I pushed the manila envelope toward him. "Open it." He did, with no trace of nerves. Inside was a stack of $100 bills, banded, and a single typed sheet of paper. "There's $75,000 there," I said. My voice sounded hollow, coming from a great distance. "It's liquid, untraceable. From my personal savings, not from James's estate or the trust." He didn't touch the money. He read the paper. It was a simple, stark agreement. It stated that upon accepting the payment, he would terminate his relationship with Chloe Eleanor Everly within 1 week. He would provide a plausible, non-damaging reason for the breakup that left her self-esteem intact. He would never contact her again. He would move out of the state. There was a line for his signature. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw a genuine emotion, incredulous admiration. "You're buying me off." "I'm offering you a more efficient transaction," I said, the words ash in my mouth. "This is cash. Now. No waiting for a marriage, no legal entanglements, no need to manipulate or perform for years. You can walk away clean. Take it and build your practical life somewhere else." He was silent for a long minute, staring at the money. I could see the calculations flying behind his eyes. The risk assessment. The profit and loss of marrying a suspicious heiress versus taking a clean, immediate payout. And if I say no? He asked quietly. Then I show Chloe the tailor's invoice. I tell her about this meeting. I lay out my case. You'll have to work very, very hard to convince her. I'm just a paranoid, bitter old woman trying to ruin her happiness. It will be a battle. It will poison what you have. And even if you win, you will have me watching your every move for the rest of your life. I will become a permanent, hostile auditor of your marriage. I saw it click. The cost-benefit analysis was complete. The path of least resistance, the highest immediate yield, was right in front of him. A slow, cynical smile touched his lips. It was the most honest expression I'd ever seen on his face. You're ruthless, Evelyn. I like that. He picked up the pen I had laid out. For the record, I do care about her. This will hurt her. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Sign the paper. He did. A quick, confident scrawl. He slid the paper back to me, then picked up the envelope, weighing it in his hand as if judging the quality of fruit. A week, you said? A week. And it needs to be a reason that doesn't destroy her. A job opportunity overseas. A family emergency. Something she can't follow you into. Make it clean. He stood, tucking the envelope inside his jacket. He looked at me not with hatred, but with the camaraderie of a fellow player who'd been outmaneuvered in a single sharp move. She really is lucky to have you, he said, and I couldn't tell if it was a final jab or a statement of cold fact. Then he turned and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. I was alone. The silence roared in my ears. I looked down at the signed paper. The ink was black final. I had done it. I had won. Why then did I feel like I had just swallowed a lump of lead that would never digest? Why did the victory taste of bile and copper? I had discovered his betrayal, and in my response I had committed my own, one far more profound and intimate. I had just betrayed my daughter's trust, her autonomy, her right to her own life and her own mistakes. I had become the manipulator I sought to destroy. The discovery was complete. The betrayal was now mine. The week that followed was an exercise in exquisite, self-inflicted torture. I moved through my life as a ghost, haunting my own home, performing the rituals of normalcy while my secret screamed inside my skull. Leo, true to his transactional nature, executed his exit with chilling precision. He waited 4 days. I know because I counted every agonizing hour, watching Chloe float through the house in a bubble of pre-wedding bliss. She was finalizing the seating chart at the kitchen table, humming. Leo's been a little distant today, she mused, tapping her pen. But he said he's swamped with a big proposal for a client in Singapore. So ambitious. The word Singapore made my stomach clench. He was laying the groundwork. The call came on a Friday evening. Chloe was in her room, packing an overnight bag for a bridal spa day with her maid of honor. I was pretending to read a magazine in the living room, every nerve ending raw. I heard her phone ring. Her cheerful, "Hey you." A pause. Then silence. A long, terrible silence. I put the magazine down, my breath held. I heard a small, confused sound. Then what? Leo, slow down. I don't understand. More silence. Then a sharp, wounded gasp. Singapore? Permanently? But the wedding, when did this happen? I closed my eyes. He was doing it. He was using the script. Her voice became a frantic, rising tide. No, wait. We can do long distance. I can come with you. My job. I can find something there. Leo, please just talk to me. I heard the raw panic, the desperate bargaining. It was the sound of a world collapsing in real time. The sound I had purchased. Then her voice dropped, hollow, broken. You're not asking me to come. You're ending it. A pause. Because it's what's best for your career? The words were choked. What about us? What about what's best for us? I couldn't listen anymore. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked to the foot of the stairs. I saw her door was ajar. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, still holding the phone to her ear, but he was clearly gone. Her shoulders were slumped, her face ashen, utterly vacant. She looked like she'd been physically hollowed out. She slowly lowered the phone, staring at it as if it were a foreign, hostile object. Then she let out a sound, a low animal moan of pure pain, and crumpled forward, her face in her hands. That was my cue. The role I had written for myself. The comforter. I walked up the stairs, each step heavy with my guilt. I pushed the door open. Chloe? Sweetheart, what's wrong? She couldn't speak. She just shook her head, her body racked with silent, shuddering sobs. I sat beside her and gathered her into my arms. She was limp, a rag doll of grief. She buried her face in my shoulder, and the sobs became audible, wrenching cries that shook us both. He's gone, she finally gasped, the words muffled against my blouse. He got a permanent transfer. To Singapore. He said he can't ask me to wait. He said it's over. I held her tighter, stroking her hair. Oh, my baby. I'm so sorry. The words were true, but they were also the greatest lie I'd ever told. I was the architect of this pain. My embrace was a cage of deceit. Why? She wept. Why wouldn't he fight for us? We had everything planned. I said all the right things. The hollow, useless platitudes of heartbreak. Sometimes people make choices we can't understand. You deserve someone who chooses you unequivocally. This pain won't last forever. Each one was a stone I added to the wall between us. The next few days were a blur of devastation. The wedding, of course, was canceled. I became a machine of dissolution. I made the calls. I spoke to Sophia, the wedding planner, my voice flat and businesslike as I instructed her to cancel everything. I negotiated the non-refundable deposits, absorbing the financial loss without a flinch. It felt like a fitting penance. I called the guests. I returned gifts. I fielded the pitying calls and the whispered speculation. Through it all, Chloe was a ghost. She moved through the house in pajamas, her eyes swollen and red. She didn't cry much after that first night. She just shut down. She stopped talking. She'd stare out the window for hours. She picked at the food I made. The vibrant, hopeful woman was gone, replaced by a silent, broken stranger. And I, her mother, was the cause. Every time I brought her tea, every time I coaxed her to eat a few bites of soup, I was not nurturing her. I was administering poison and then trying to nurse the symptoms. The cognitive dissonance was a constant, screaming static in my mind. My action, the cold, calculated meeting with Leo, was complete. But the reaction, the living, breathing consequence of it, was my beautiful girl, broken on the shore of my good intentions. I had wanted to spare her a lifetime of exploitation. Instead, I had inflicted a trauma that stole the light from her eyes. I had traded a potential future betrayal for a certain, present annihilation of her spirit. The weight of what I had done settled on me, not as a sharp guilt, but as a permanent, crushing gravity. I had taken action to protect my child. And in doing so, I had destroyed the most fundamental thing between a parent and a child, trust. She trusted me to hold her while she cried, not knowing my hands were the ones that pushed her. The public fallout was a quieter, more protracted agony than the private heartbreak. There was no dramatic confrontation, no satisfying scene of Leo being exposed. He was simply gone, a ghost who had vanished into a lucrative job overseas, the perfect, plausible villain for a tragedy. He played his part to the end, even sending Chloe a formal, regretful email a few days later, wishing her well and reiterating that the opportunity was too transformative to pass up. It was a masterclass in cowardice dressed as ambition, and it cemented his role as the sole cause of her pain in the eyes of the world. and the world had opinions. The first wave was sympathy, thick and cloying as syrup. Friends and family descended with casseroles and helpless, pitying looks. Our home, once a sanctuary, became a shrine to averted nuptials. Aunt Helen hugged Chloe too tightly and whispered, "Men are beasts, darling. You're better off." As if Leo had died in a war, not fled to a tax haven. My sister, Margot, pulled me aside in the kitchen, her voice low. "You must be so relieved, Evelyn." I froze, a dishcloth in my hand. "Relieved? Oh, come on," she said, refilling her wine glass. "You never liked him. I could tell. All that slick charm. He was after her trust fund, everyone could see it." She patted my arm. "You must be thanking God he showed his true colors before the I do's." Her words were a dagger twisting in a wound she didn't know I'd made. "I just want Chloe to be happy," I murmured, the most anemic truth I'd ever uttered. "Well, she will be," Margot said confidently. "Once she gets over it." Bullet dodged. Thanks to him having a shred of conscience, I guess. Thanks to me, the secret screamed inside me. Thanks to $75,000 in a manila envelope. The sympathy curdled, as it always does, into speculation. At the grocery store, I'd catch fragments of conversations by the avocados that would halt when I approached. "Such a shame. I heard he left her for someone in his office." "No, I heard it was financial trouble." Poor Evelyn having to deal with all those cancellations. We were a local soap opera, a cautionary tale. Chloe bore the public scrutiny with a numb dignity that broke my heart further. She forced herself to go back to work after 2 weeks. She said her clients, people in genuine crisis, were a welcome distraction from her own silly little heartbreak, as she'd started to call it, minimizing her own pain. But I'd see her come home, drained not just from work, but from the weight of the unasked questions in her colleagues' eyes, from the well-meaning but exhausting check-ins. The most profound consequence, however, was not public gossip. It was the slow, insidious change in Chloe herself. The grief didn't fade, it fossilized. It hardened into a permanent layer of cynicism, a brittleness that hadn't been there before. She stopped talking about the future. She threw herself into work with a grim intensity. She let friendships lapse, too tired to perform wellness for people who saw her as the almost bride. And the distance between us, once a narrow, navigable stream, became a vast, silent ocean. She was polite. She was grateful for my support. But the easy intimacy, the unspoken understanding that had been the bedrock of our relationship since James died, was gone. When I tried to hug her, her body would be stiff, a brief acquiescence before she pulled away. Our conversations were logistical, bills, groceries, the weather. The deep talks about hopes and fears evaporated. She was walls and battlements, and I was the besieging army she couldn't see, the cause of the damage she was fortifying against. One evening, about 6 months after the non-wedding, we were washing up after a quiet dinner. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the clink of plates. Out of nowhere, she said, "Do you think I scared him off?" The question was so soft, so full of a vulnerability she hadn't shown in months, it stole my breath. I turned off the tap. "What?" "No, Chloe. Never." "Then why?" She stared out the dark window at her reflection, not at me. We were so happy. I was so sure. How could I have been that wrong about a person? What does that say about my judgment? She turned her gaze to me, her eyes haunted. "How can I ever trust myself to know someone again, Mom?" In that moment I saw the true lasting damage. It wasn't just a broken heart. It was a shattered sense of self. Leo's betrayal, my betrayal wearing Leo's face, had eroded her confidence in her own perception of reality. She was questioning her own mind, her own worth. And I, who had caused this existential wound, was the only person she could ask for reassurance. The irony was a physical pain in my chest. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice thick, "your judgment is fine. You are kind and you see the best in people. That is a strength, not a weakness. Sometimes people are just very good at hiding who they are. Every word was a hypocrite's prayer. She gave a small bitter smile. You never liked him, did you? The air left the room. This was the closest she'd come to the truth. I had to be so careful. A confession now would destroy her completely. It would be selfish, a burden shifting that would annihilate any chance of her ever healing. I had concerns, I admitted, which was the first fully true thing I'd said to her about Leo in a year. But my concerns weren't what mattered. Your happiness did. And I am so sorry he wasn't the man you believed he was. It was a non-answer wrapped in a truth. She searched my face for a moment, then nodded, turning back to the dishes. Yeah, she whispered, more to herself than to me. He really wasn't. The public consequence was not scandal or shame for me. It was this: living as a monument to my daughter's pain, the silent curator of the museum of her broken trust. I had to watch the vibrant colors of her spirit leach away into gray, knowing I held the brush that had painted this new dismal landscape. The world saw a mother comforting a daughter through a bad breakup. Only I knew I was the surgeon who had performed the amputation, now applying bandages and pretending I'd found her that way. The social whispers faded with time, as they do. New gossip replaced ours. But in our house, the silence between us grew deeper, more profound. It was the silence of a crime scene where only the criminal remained, tending to the victim who didn't know she'd been attacked. Healing did not come as a single moment of forgiveness or a tearful confession. It came as a slow tectonic shift, measured in inches over years. It was a glacier's retreat, leaving behind scarred but fertile ground. Chloe moved out 2 years after the non-wedding. It wasn't a dramatic exit. She found a small apartment closer to her clinic. She said she needed her own space to rebuild. The word was a knife. I helped her pack, my hands steady as we wrapped her things in newspaper, the silence between us a living thing. When the last box was loaded into her friend's car, she stood on the porch and looked at me. The morning light caught the fine lines around her eyes, lines etched by a grief I'd given her. I'll be okay, Mom, she said, and it sounded like both a promise and a question. I know you will, I said, and that was a prayer. The house on Willow Lane was a tomb after she left. I heard every creak of the floorboards James had laid, every sigh of the plumbing. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was accusatory. I had fought so hard to protect our home, our legacy, and in the end, I was its sole occupant, a caretaker of ghosts and secrets. I threw myself into my work with a ferocity that mirrored Chloe's. I took on challenging large-scale projects that consumed my mental space. I traveled for sourcing. I built a successful, lonely little empire. I dated occasionally, nice, uncomplicated men who found me pleasant but distant. I could never fully let them in. How could I? My heart was a locked room, and the key was buried under a confession I could never make. The change began, as true change often does, with an external crisis. It was 4 years after Leo. I was installing a major project in a home 3 hours away when I slipped on a polished concrete step and fractured my wrist. It was a clean break, but it required surgery, a plate, pins. I was rendered one-handed, helpless, and utterly alone in my big empty house. Chloe called me every day from the moment she heard. Her voice was practical, concerned. Do you have someone to drive you to post-op? Are you managing the pain meds schedule? I'm fine, sweetheart. Really? I'd lie, struggling to open a milk carton with my teeth and my good hand. The 3rd day after surgery, the pain was a deep, throbbing nausea, and the loneliness was a physical ache worse than the bone. The doorbell rang. I shuffled to it, my arm in a bulky cast and sling. It was Chloe. She held a reusable grocery bag in each hand and had a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She looked at my pale, pained face, my unwashed hair, the chaos of the kitchen visible behind me. You're not fine, she said simply. Move. I'm coming in. She didn't ask. She just took over. She cleaned the kitchen. She cooked soft, nourishing foods I could eat with one hand. She helped me wash my hair, her touch gentle and efficient like a nurse's. She set up a bed for herself on the living room couch. "I'm staying until you can at least button your own jeans," she declared. It was during this week of enforced proximity and unspoken care that the wall began to crack. We didn't talk about Leo. We talked about everything else. Her work. A promotion to lead a new trauma-informed therapy program. My projects. Books. The absurdity of daytime television. We found a rhythm again, born of necessity but fueled by the old, deep love that had never actually died. It had just been buried under an avalanche of my making. One night, she made her father's famous potato soup. The smell of leeks and thyme filled the house, a scent from a happier time. We ate at the oak table. The silence was comfortable for the first time in years. She looked at my cast, then at my face. "You never really got over Dad, did you?" The question surprised me. I learned to live with it. Like you did. "I think it's different," she said, stirring her soup. "You lost your partner. Your protector. I think after he died, you felt like you were the only one left to protect me. From everything." The air grew still. She was looking at me not with accusation, but with a dawning painful clarity. The psychology degree was finally turning its lens on us. "It's a mother's job," I said weakly. "Is it?" she asked, her voice soft. "Or is it a mother's job to equip her child to protect themselves, even if it means watching them get hurt?" The truth of it hung between us, vast and terrifying. She was articulating the very flaw in my logic, the fatal error of my love. "I was so afraid for you," I whispered, the first crack in my dam. "I know you were," she said. And in those 4 words, I heard an ocean of understanding. She didn't know the specifics, but she was starting to see the shape of the prison I had built for myself. You know, in my work I see people who've been betrayed. The ones who struggle the most aren't always the ones who were betrayed by a lover. It's the ones who feel betrayed by the person who was supposed to protect them. That's the wound that never quite heals. Her words were a laser, pinpointing the exact nature of my crime. I had positioned myself as her protector, and in my secret action, I had become the ultimate betrayer of that sacred role. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and unstoppable. I tried to blink them back, but one traced a path down my cheek and plopped into my soup. Chloe saw it. She didn't say anything. She just reached across the table and placed her hand over my good one. Her touch was warm, solid. An anchor. The healing didn't happen in that moment. But that was the moment the thaw began. She moved back to her apartment, but she came over every weekend. We started having Sunday dinners again. A tradition we rebuilt from the ashes. The conversations grew deeper, more real. We talked about fear. About loss. About the terrible weight of loving someone so much it twists your morals. I knew then that a full reconciliation, a true healing, was impossible while my secret lay between us like a rotting corpse, poisoning the foundation. She deserved the truth. Not for my absolution but for her freedom. The truth was hers. I had stolen her choice once. I could not, in the name of protecting her, steal her right to the truth of her own life. The resolution was taking shape. It would not be a happy ending. It would be a bloody, painful surgery. But it was the only path to a clean scar. I began to write it all down. Every detail. The invoice, the hotel, the envelope, the exact words spoken. I printed out bank records showing the cash withdrawal. I attached a copy of the signed agreement. I put it all in a new envelope. This one I would not give to a manipulator. I would give it to my daughter, and I would accept whatever consequence followed. That was the only moral closure possible. The healing would be in the handing over of the knife, and baring my throat. I gave her the envelope on a Sunday evening, much like the one when Leo first came to dinner. The garden was blooming, the same smell of earth and jasmine in the air. We had just finished eating. I'd made pot roast. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating slow and heavy like a funeral drum. This was the end of something and the beginning of something else, and I was ready for whatever it was. Chloe, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. There's something I need to give you. Something I should have given you a long time ago. I slid the thick manila envelope across the oak table, the surface scarred with our history. She looked from it to my face, her expression wary, confused. What is this? A design portfolio. It's the truth, I said. About Leo. About why he really left. Her face went very still. All the softness of the evening drained from it, replaced by a cautious professional mask, the one she used with clients bracing for devastating news. She didn't reach for it. Mom. Please, I said. Just read it. Read it all. Then you can do whatever you need to do. You can leave. You can never speak to me again. I will accept it. But you have to know. You have a right to know what happened to your life. The words hung there, final. She searched my eyes and I didn't look away. I let her see the full, unvarnished guilt, the sorrow, the love that had mutated into this terrible thing. Slowly, she picked up the envelope. It was heavy with its contents. Should I read it now? However you need to, I said. I'll be here. Or I'll go if you want me to. She shook her head, a tiny movement. No. Stay. She opened the clasp and pulled out the stack of papers. I watched her face as she began to read my typed confession. I saw her eyes scan the first lines about the tailor's invoice. Her brow furrowed. Then as she read about the hotel meeting, the offer, the cash, her lips parted slightly. Her color drained. She turned to the photocopy of the signed agreement, her eyes tracing Leo's familiar signature. Then the bank withdrawal slip. There was no outburst. No scream. She read every page with a terrifying clinical silence. When she finished, she placed the papers back on the table, neatly aligning the edges. She sat back in her chair and looked out the window into the darkening garden. A full minute passed. The clock ticked in the hall. You paid him, she said finally. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It was just a statement of fact. Yes. $75,000. Yes. To leave me. Yes. She turned her gaze back to me. It was not filled with the fire of anger I had expected. It was filled with a profound, devastating pity. And that was worse. All this time, she whispered. All this time I thought it was me. I thought my love wasn't enough. I thought my judgment was broken. I built a whole new person on the foundation of that lie. A harder person. A more closed-off person. A single tear escaped, tracing the same path mine had years before. You let me believe I was unworthy. I thought I was protecting you from a lifetime of pain, I said, my own tears falling freely now. I only gave you a different kind, and I made you live it alone. I am so sorry, Chloe. There is no excuse. There is only the truth and my regret. She absorbed this, looking at the woman she'd shared a home with, who had held her while she cried, who had been the secret architect of her devastation. Did you ever think, she asked, each word measured, that maybe I needed to learn that lesson for myself? That even if he had taken everything, I would have survived it? That I was stronger than you believed. It was the core of it. The ultimate arrogance of my love. I had not believed in her resilience. I had only believed in my own ability to orchestrate her safety. I see that now, I choked out. I didn't then. I was so afraid of losing you, I ended up losing you anyway. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. She picked up the envelope. I need to go. I can't be here right now. I nodded, my heart shattering with a clean final certainty. This was the consequence. This was the justice. She walked to the door, then stopped, her hand on the knob. She didn't turn around. I don't know if I can ever forgive this, she said, her voice thick. But thank you. for finally telling me. And then she was gone. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It was not the silence of a hidden crime. It was the silence after the verdict. It was empty, but it was clean. She didn't call for 3 weeks. I didn't reach out. I waited. I tended the garden. I lived in the truth, however brutal it was. Then one afternoon my phone buzzed. A text. Chloe, can I come over? I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to be alone. That was the first stitch. There was no grand forgiveness. There is, even now, no magical return to what we were. You cannot unbreak a vase and have it be the same vase. But you can piece it back together with gold lacquer. The cracks becoming part of its story, its strength. We are piecing it back together. The cracks are visible. They always will be. Sometimes when we're having coffee, I'll see her look at me and a shadow will pass behind her eyes. The memory of the betrayal. It will live between us forever. But so will the love. A wiser, sadder, more honest love. A love that has stared into the abyss of its own capacity for harm and chosen, still to try. I was not the hero of this story. I was the villain. And perhaps in the end that is the most important story a mother can tell, that we are flawed, that our love can be a weapon, and that redemption is not found in being right, but in having the courage to be wrong fully and completely in front of the person you hurt the most. So, to you watching, I leave you with this question, the one that keeps me up some nights, the one that has no easy answer. Where does protection end and betrayal begin? Is it in the secret kept? In the choice stolen? In the belief that you know another person's heart better than they know it themselves? I thought I was drawing a line in the sand to keep my daughter safe. I didn't realize I was drawing it around her, and that the prison I built looked from the inside exactly like love. So there it is. My story. Not an easy one to tell. Not an easy one to live. For a long time I thought being a good mother meant being a shield. A wall between my child and every sharp edge in this world. I polished that shield until I could see my own reflection in it. The protector, the wise one, the keeper of the gate. But you see, when you hold a shield up for too long, you stop seeing the person you're trying to protect. You only see threats. And sometimes, in your desperation to stop one kind of pain, you become the source of another. A deeper one. A quieter, more lasting kind. What I did to Chloe. I can't dress it up. I paid a man to break her heart. I watched her world crumble and I held her while it fell. All the while knowing I was the one who'd pushed the first brick. That guilt, it becomes a part of your bones. You carry it with you. But here is what I've learned in the long quiet years since. Love isn't about building a world without pain for someone you love. That's an impossible, arrogant task. Love is about being there with your own imperfect, fragile heart, while they navigate their own pain. It's about trusting them enough to let them get hurt, and believing in their strength enough to know they can heal. I didn't trust my daughter. I didn't believe in her strength. And in failing to believe in her, I failed her. Our relationship now, it's different. It's quieter. It has scars. Some days the distance between us feels like a real physical thing. But it is an honest distance. There are no more secrets hiding in the space between our words. And for that I am grateful. If you take anything from my confession tonight, let it be this. The most dangerous lies are not the ones told by strangers. They are the lies we tell ourselves in the name of love. I know what's best. They'll never survive it. This is for their own good. Be careful of those lies. Examine them under a harsh light. Because the road to a great wrong is very often paved with what feels like a right intention. To every mother, every father, every person who loves someone so much it terrifies you. I understand. I understand the urge to control, to orchestrate, to intervene. But sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is nothing. Is to watch and to wait and to be there when they need you to be with them, not ahead of them. And to anyone out there who has been on the other side, who has felt the betrayal of a protector, who has wondered why their own judgment failed them, I am so sorry. Your pain is real. Your confusion is valid. And your strength to rebuild your own truth, that is everything. This is not a story with a happy ending. It is a story with a true one. And perhaps in the end, that is the only kind of ending that allows for real peace. Thank you for listening. For sitting with me in this hard truth. Means more than you know. If this story has touched you or made you think of your own life, your own relationships, I would be honored if you shared your thoughts down below. Tell me, what is the line between protection and control for you? Where would you have drawn it? This is a conversation that needs more light. And your voice matters. Take care of your hearts. Be gentle with them. And be even more gentle with the hearts entrusted to you. Good night.